before I quit my job, I took your course. It was great to get that knowledge from your courses and to find out how to make it work for myself. Your spreadsheets have come in super handy. Your videos are great. Like I probably watched those like 100 times before I quit my job because I'm like, I got to find out how to do this and how to do it right. You know?
I took your course in November. Once I seriously consider dispatching, and then you come with everything. You close from the paperwork, load boards, dealing with carriers, cold calling. I still use your carrier packet right to this day.
So I'm just like, I'm looking at your stuff. I'm like, oh man, this is really good stuff. I haven't thought about this before. I wonder if this guy's got a course. And of course, you mentioned your course.
Yeah.
So I took the course, and I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Filling in all the gaps. I'm like, all right, this is perfect, dude. I was going back to your course as I was dispatching my first load. No joke. No joke. I was like, oh crap. How do you say to do this? What's connecting again? Like, what? Okay, wait. What's a rate card? Oh yeah. Right. Okay.
What's going on, guys? This is Francisco with Covenant Dispatch LLC, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Really quick, before I get into this video, I want you to do me a favor. Right under this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you like this video and if you like our content. Right next to that subscribe button, go ahead and smash that like button so that this video can reach a broader audience, helping those looking for this kind of information. And then lastly, go ahead and hit that notification bell so that you can be alerted for when we post future videos. Let's get right into the video. As you can see in the title and the thumbnail, I want to deal with something that I dealt with already in a previous video that I had. But the person asked this question in the past couple of videos that I've been putting. And as you can see, I whipped out the whiteboard for this video because I believe an illustration on the whiteboard is going to help you better understand what I'm trying to convey in this video. But I've been answering questions that people put in the comment section. And as our YouTube channel is growing, people are asking more questions in the comment section. So I'll try to pick out the ones that are more generalized so it can help those that might have that same question. So the ones that I believe most people would ask and they stand out, I go ahead and pull those out and I put them on here so you can see, and hopefully it can answer your question as well. So this particular person, and I'll put the question in here somewhere on this video, they said, so as a dispatcher, the only way to get paid is invoicing the carrier, question mark. So it's like a two-part question. Then they say, even if the carrier and dispatch sign a contract with the factoring company to disperse the money to the carrier and dispatcher, is this method legal? Just confirming. So this is like a two-part question, but it's still asking one main question, really. And the question is, how should you receive money as a freight dispatcher? Is it legal to receive money from the factoring company or the broker or anybody else? Or should you just invoice the carrier directly? So to answer that, I'm going to draw an illustration here. And what I really want to do in this whiteboard is just track the monetary flow. I want to track where the money starts and how it eventually gets into your hand and how it gets into the carrier's hand, so on and so forth, right? That way we can track it and make sure that as the dispatcher, you don't interrupt that monetary flow. I'll put the article in the description under this video, but if you go on Google, they have a great feature now called AI Overview. And I've already done a video on this, but they brought up a lot of other articles that break this down, and I love it. But one of the articles, it starts off by saying this. It says, no, freight dispatchers are not permitted to handle money or be involved in monetary transactions. Their role, simply put, is to handle the paperwork and represent the carrier. That's all a freight dispatcher does. A freight dispatcher should not be receiving money then paying the carrier. That's what a broker does, right? And so we want to make sure, because the biggest issue right now when it comes to freight dispatchers are they involving themselves, or are they operating in the capacity of a freight broker, and if they are operating that capacity, they should fall under the same jurisdiction as a freight broker, meaning you have to get licensed, you have to get insured. One of the great perks about being a freight dispatcher is you get to make money in the logistics field, or in the freight logistics field. You get to make money without having to be licensed or insured. It's not that you're trying to avoid those things. It's just that the role of a freight dispatcher it's not necessary to be licensed or insured. And for a lot of different reasons, which I can't answer in this particular video. But to make sure that you're not operating as a freight broker so that you don't get yourself in any legal trouble in the future, I want to go ahead and answer this question. So this is going to make more sense once we track the monetary flow. So here's how this thing works, right? How it works is you have a shipper. The shipper, now we're tracking the monetary flow. So I'm going to go ahead and put SH for the shipper. The shipper needs a load to be shipped, right? So what they do is they reach out. For the most part, as a freight dispatcher, you're going to be dealing with freight brokers on the load board, right? So the shipper has a load and needs to get shipped out, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to look for a freight broker to be able to handle that for them. So the reason why a lot of shippers do that is because they don't want to deal with a carrier directly. They'd rather just say, hey, let's negotiate with each other, right? Let's negotiate and let's figure out what we can negotiate so that you can handle this particular load and make sure that it gets shipped out, right? So it relieves them of some of that responsibility. So then the freight broker says, okay, cool. We'll come to an agreement as far as what I'll take for that load to then figure out how to get it handled. So then the freight broker, once they have ownership of that particular load, they go and they find. Now I'm going to slip you in here so you see what I'm saying. They're going to go and find a carrier. But as a freight dispatcher, you represent a carrier. So you may come in contact with, a lot of times you'll come in contact with a freight broker. So I'm going to abbreviate that FD. Now, because you represent a carrier, right? I'm going to go ahead and draw that out. Because you represent a carrier, I'm going to abbreviate that C. You're trying, and your job is in their best interest to find a good paying load. So the shipper negotiates on a load with the freight broker. The freight broker will negotiate with the freight dispatcher on how much they want for that load, right? Then the freight dispatcher, when they negotiate it, that money will eventually get paid over to that carrier, right? So let me explain how a factoring company is involved in all this so it makes sense. There's an industry standard that the shipper, once they negotiate with the freight broker, it's called a load tender. So they say, hey, here's the load tender. Let's say it's $1,000, right? The freight broker says, okay, cool. I'll accept that, right? Now that shipper has 30 days to pay that freight broker, right? Industry standard. So because the shipper has 30 days to deal with that, to pay that freight broker, the freight broker is going to say, well, most freight brokerages and most carriers are small mom and pop businesses, right? Small mom and pop logistics companies. So they can't really, or they'd rather not really wait the 30 days to get paid. So what they do is they deal with what's called a factoring company. Now, a factoring company is like a financial institution that purchases invoices ahead of time and pays you for a percentage. So if it takes 30 days for the shipper to pay that broker, the factoring company will say, hey, we'll work with you and we'll purchase that invoice and we'll pay you ahead of time and then just charge you a percentage, right? And of course, they get their money from the percentage. No different than a bank giving you a loan for the interest on that loan, right? That's how factoring companies operate. And factoring companies are big in the logistics, freight logistics industry. So what happens is this, the freight broker works on that. So then they get paid immediately. So let's say they deal with it for, let's say 1,000. They submit that paperwork saying, hey, we came to an agreement with the shipper. They give that paperwork. The factoring company says, okay, this is legit. And then they pay them that money. So now what does that come into the carrier? So since the carrier, since the broker has to wait 30 days, the carrier also has to wait. In most cases, or if let's say the freight broker wants to take that long, they have options like quick pay and stuff. But if they want, the standard is 30 days. So most carriers aren't going to wait that long either. So what happens? They themselves deal with a factoring company and say, hey, we want you to purchase our invoice. That way we can get paid right away, right? So now, again, we're tracking the monetary flow. So then how would that really work? Okay, so it works like this, very simple. Shipper, broker, come up with an agreement, right? On how much the load's going to be. Freight broker looks for a carrier, stumbles across you as a freight dispatcher, says, hey, we'll do it for this much. You say, cool, that works, right? So now the money goes from shipper, and I'll try to find some arrows here. It goes from shipper, and if the freight broker is using a factoring company, go from shipper, freight broker says, we want to get this factored. Factoring company says, okay. They in turn pay that freight broker. We're tracking the money, right? Then, because the carrier also has that 30-day standard that they would have to wait for, the carrier says, we want to deal with you also. So then the factoring company says, okay, we'll pay you that money. So now we're tracking the flow, right? We're tracking this money. And some factoring companies, so this goes back to the question that the person asked. Some factoring companies say, hey, what we'll do, and I'm going to erase some of these arrows real quick. some factoring companies say, hey, to the carrier, here's what we'll do. We'll set up your freight dispatcher and you on our system. And when the money comes in, right, when this money comes in, we'll pay the dispatcher and we'll pay you separately. Here's the error with that, is that when the money gets, when we're tracking the money, right, when it gets to the factoring company, if the factoring company then takes that money and disperses it, you've interrupted that flow from shipper to broker to factoring company to carrier. You've then interrupted that flow. That's where you start to lean into the jurisdiction of a freight broker, and you can possibly find yourself in legal trouble. But if the transaction goes from shipper to freight broker to factoring company to carrier directly, then you're not interrupting with that money flow. So then how do you get paid as a freight dispatcher? Very simple. It's not complicated at all. You send an invoice to the carrier. That's it. That's it. And you charge them a percentage of the gross. That's all you do. You just send them an invoice separately. Has nothing to do with this flow, has nothing to do with this process. You send them a separate invoice for your services. That way you don't get yourself in legal trouble in the future. Guys, I hope this illustration makes sense. I know there's a lot of arrows, a lot of moving pieces, and hopefully I conveyed it in a way that makes sense. But hopefully this makes sense, and hopefully you take this information and consider it whenever you're operating as a freight dispatcher. I wouldn't get paid from the factoring company. I wouldn't allow them to pay me because I don't want to catch myself into any legal trouble. It's very simple. Come up with an agreement form with that carrier, invoice them according to what you put in that form, and get paid that way, and it'll make everything a whole lot easier. Guys, I hope this video helped you out. Send it to someone you know it might help, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.